Yes, my son is taller than me, okay? I want to thank all of you for coming here today and telling your stories, paying your respects to someone that we will greatly miss. As you can see, there are lots of pictures and there are lots of awards here too that Art has received over the many years. And I remember the awards were in a box on the table in the dining room. And we were going through his things and the kids were there. And I said, what are we going to do with all the awards? Are we going to display them? And Glenn said, yeah, I think we will. And I said, well, do you think that your dad would want that? And he said, no, but he's not here, and we want them up there. My name's John, and I'm his son-in-law. I always called him Glenn. He only let his friends call him Art. We have heard so many heartwarming stories about Glenn from all of you out there. I thought I would share a few stories about him from this side, as I heard it, from the 33 years I've known him. Let's talk about your friend Art for a moment. You cannot have a conversation about Art's life without talking about the impact he had on his industry, his company, and most importantly, the people he worked with. If you asked him why he was so successful, he would say it was because he had a great team. It was never about him. When his wife Barbara passed away 17 years ago, it was you guys that got him out of bed every morning. How much did he love his job? Until he retired at the ripe old age of 80, his alarm went off at 3:30 every morning. We live in the basement, and I could hear that alarm go off in the mornings. He was out the door by 3:50, and so he can get to work by 4 a.m. He worked a normal person's half day before most people showed up. How much did he love his employees? One day, I asked him how his day went, and he said, fantastic. When I asked him what made it fantastic, he said someone called him and said, I've got a problem with one of your employees. I said, oh no, who was the employee? He said, I don't know. I told him when he had a problem with me, call me back, and I hung up on him. It was either his boss or an engineer. He had a lot of signature phrases, but his favorite consisted of 4 words, and it's not what many of you think. His favorite saying was, it can't be done. His response was always, how do you know if you don't even try? If you wanted to light a fire under him, say that, and he would make it his mission to prove you wrong. If you don't know how it all got started, I will tell you as he told me. He was working for Coaxco and manufacturing a few cables for Dick Sass at NEC when Dick called him up one day and asked him to breakfast. Dick said to him, I'm broke, taking out another mortgage on my house, have no real prospects. How would you like to come work for me? Art said, you gotta admire a guy who is that honest with you, and said yes. The rest, they say, is history. You get a great leader like Dick Sass, and he thought of Dick as a great leader, and an innovator like Art, and you have the perfect storm for great things. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Glenn as I knew him, since that's what I called him. In his retirement, there were 3 things he looked forward to. Wednesdays, he'd be there at 5 in the morning, Tyco, with his former team, coffee with Gordon, and breakfast with his kids on Mondays. Gordon, you were his best friend. He talked about your travels all the time, where you went, what you were doing, what type of fish you caught, if any. He believed every one of your big fish stories, how you would catch and release several, then go to Costco and grab some fish for dinner. Malai, Toon, Ho-Ho, he often spoke of the friendship he had with you girls. Doris and Dana, there will always be a place in his heart for you. Most of you know Art as the great innovator he was, and how he always tried to improve the quality of life for those who worked around him and for him. But I thought you might be interested to know a little bit about him as the regular guy I knew. Now, don't get me wrong, I would put his love for his family up against anyone's. But I didn't really see him as the big family guy. The person that brought the family together was Barbara. Barbara was the matriarch, getting the family together, planning Christmas Eve, cooking, cleaning, then sitting back to watch everyone have a good time. With Barbara's passing, Glenn loved Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas Eve, but beyond that, I think his favorite family get-together was at Spirit Mountain during college football season. There's a story about Happy, the family chihuahua. Happy began eating his salad while his back was turned, and Glenn scared the piss out of her. Screamed, yelled, chased her behind the console TV where she was back there scared, and said, "Get over here," like she was going to come to him when he says it like that. I heard a story about stabbings with a fork to anyone who would be bold enough to reach across the dinner table. I've got one here of you, but I didn't mention you or call you out. I just was going to say one of their sons asked, "How do you fall out of love?" But one sunny day, I drove to his home and noticed a dead mole in the driveway, and I thought it was kind of weird that it still sat there. And I went inside the house and asked Barbara, "Why do you have a dead mole in the middle of your driveway?" And she said that Glenn wanted the other moles to see what would happen to them if they came around the yard. Now, I know I've been here a while, and I've got just a few more stories that I would like to share with his 4 children. David, your dad always knew and admired your love for your children. He recognized how you put them above all else. Mark, in the years I've known your dad, he respected the work you did. He was in the construction battalion in the Navy, so he understood the value of hard physical work. If you asked him, he would tell you that the Navy was a part of the Seabees and not the other way around. He was a Seabee for 4 years, something like that, and you worked in construction for 40 plus years, and you should know that your dad respected you for that. He was so happy for your retirement. When I talked to him about the Monday breakfast, he said, "I got to know Mark." And Glenn Jr., sometimes during the year, there would be months without you and your dad talking to each other, but for 4 months out of the year, he got to have a conversation with you about fantasy football or whatever else crept into the conversation. I can tell you that he hated fantasy football more than he enjoyed it, but he always loved talking to you about it. For him, it was something that he got to do with you. And it wasn't just fantasy football. It was anytime there was an important life decision, you were the one that he relied on. Whether it was financial questions or fantasy football decisions, it was always, "I'll talk to Glennie about it." Fantasy football, financial future, I'm not certain which was more important to him. And Sean, I know that you got frustrated with him when he resisted your help around the yard or in the house, but I think it was just a father protective of his daughter. I think about your mom when JJ experiences milestones in his life because how much time they spent together. During JJ's college graduation, I said to your dad, "I think Barbara would love this moment and been proud of JJ." And your dad said, "That's my daughter's son." JJ, I don't have to tell you how much your papa meant to you meant to your papa, but when he was in the hospital, he did not want to go into a nursing home with strangers taking care of him. You were his primary caregiver for the last days of his life, so thank you for that. I know all of you loved and appreciated Glenn for who he was and how he treated you. Please know that you've done a lot for him too. You've improved his quality of life over the years, and I can't thank you enough for the friendships he enjoyed. He never talked about his accomplishments. If it weren't for you telling us about how good he was at what he did, we would never know. I said this one other time at his 80th birthday, but most of you weren't there, and it's worth repeating. We were watching TV, an interview with an athlete on TV a long time ago, and the athlete started talking about how good he was. Glenn looked at me and said, "John, if you're good, you can tell people. If you're great, others will tell you." He never told anyone how good he was, but others did. So, Arthur Glenn Buck Sr., we will miss you greatly, but your memories will live with us forever.